Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Well, it's a new day in Washington and Congress. Or is it? John Boehner has left, but it looks like we have a new face that is going to be the same. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. It's interesting that John Boehner says that what drove him out of office was right-wing talk radio, conservative talk radio. This story from WND, John Boehner says that it was right-leaning talk radio hosts in particular that led to his political downfall. He says, understand what was going on here. There were hundreds of radio hosts trying to outright each other, who, when combined with active social media posters, caused unnecessary turmoil and confusion over political and cultural matters. Yeah, he sounds exactly like the SPLC, doesn't he? The problem is that we were talking, you were listening, and you were writing and telling other people about it on social media. It wasn't anything that he was doing wrong. It wasn't that he was ignoring the wishes of the GOP voters who'd put him in, that he betrayed them on the issues. No, that had nothing to do with it. It was the people who blew the whistle on him. That's the way it is in Washington all the time, isn't it? Perfect metaphor, as we said last night, and again, as Huckabee pointed out, the blimp, the out-of-control blimp that we saw there. That's a perfect metaphor for our out-of-control government. A $3 billion blimp. How's that for inflation? $3 billion, of course, it's the Pentagon, and they're part of the runaway, out-of-control government. Certainly the military-industrial complex, the surveillance state part of that. This balloon broke its tether. It drugged the tether then through power lines, causing over 27,000 customers to lose power. And as this was happening yesterday, we were watching this, it was just like, this is what everybody is looking at in terms of the economy. We've got this massive, hyper-inflated blimp from Washington that is on the rampage, most of it being justified by defense spending. Everybody is wondering when and where it'll crash and exactly how much damage it's going to do. But don't worry, because yesterday, just as they were getting ready to debate economic issues with the GOP House, with John Boehner as his parting shot, decided that they would put even more hot air into the runaway blimp. And so today, Paul Ryan has now become Speaker, and he pledges to fix the broken house. He's going to fix this runaway blimp of Washington. And you can believe him because, well, not really. He's been on the wrong side of most of the big issues. He's been on the side of open borders. He's been on the side of the big spending part of the Republican side. Of course, that's one of the reasons why the Democrats love him so much. The House Whip said he was a great choice, and so many of the Democrats love him. And of course, he got 83% of the GOP. This isn't something that the Democrats are doing to us. This is going to continue the legacy and the way that business is being conducted by Boehner, by Pelosi, and now we have Paul Ryan. Put a different face on it. It really doesn't matter. They are exactly the same on all of the key issues, the secret corporate trade agreements, the open borders, the globalism, the single Washington party, which the leadership of both houses, both parties represent, and he is the new face for all that. But this whole deal of extending this debt ceiling for another couple of years was an effort to put a new mask in, a new face, and to give him an extended honeymoon. And he's trying to pretend that he doesn't want to have anything to do with it. This story from CNN, Paul Ryan-O, and that's what we need to start calling him, Paul Ryan-O, doesn't want anyone to pin the budget deal on him. He says, about the process, I can say this. I think the process stinks. He's running against Washington while he's in Washington, while he's part of the leadership. He says, this is not the way to do the people's business. No, this is the way you do the corporation's business. And that's what he's been doing. He says, under new management, we're not going to do the people's business this way. He criticized outgoing Speaker John Boehner for cutting this deal with Obama and the Democrat leadership behind closed doors. And yet he supported precisely that for the corporations that he works for when it came to the fast-track trade agreement. This is just doublespeak. But just how big is this national debt, of course? Remember that in 2011, John Boehner reached this sequester agreement with Obama. At that time, the cumulative debt was $14 trillion. Now it is $18 trillion 4 years later, and they've just extended it to $20 trillion. So how big is the national debt? We have this article on Infowars.com from Steve Watson. He points out that it is as big as 120,000 Floyd Mayweather fights. The Daily Signal decided to put together some statistics to illustrate just how much of a problem the spiraling black hole of debt is. They note that Floyd Mayweather, the highest paid athlete on the planet, earned around $300 million in 2015 from an average of 2 fights per year. So he would have to fight 120,000 fights. Take a look at Taylor Swift, for example. Okay, she's made $80 million doing in 1 year from 55 concerts. So they look at this and they say, well, in order to pay off just 1 day's worth of interest on this debt, and where does that interest go? It goes to the Federal Reserve and the people that they sell the debt to. Taylor Swift would have to perform every day for 3 years at the kind of money that she's making. See, you really can't get your head around this. These are astronomical figures. Remember Everett Dirksen back in the 50s or 60s saying, a billion here, a billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. We cannot comprehend just how big it is. But I can tell you that in just 4 years, Boehner, working with Obama and the Democrat leadership, has extended the debt ceiling by 43%. Maybe you can understand that. Now, Rand Paul has said he's going to filibuster this, but Time magazine points out why this will fail. Of course, it's going to fail because he's being opposed by the GOP leadership. They say he can thank his fellow Kentuckian, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. They say on Thursday afternoon, Senator Rand Paul took the floor of the Senate. He began speaking for what could be more than 8 hours. The Kentucky senator earlier had vowed that he would do everything he could to stop the 2-year debt ceiling raise, and the budget agreement passed yesterday, actually passed on Tuesday, 266 to 167. He says, it's hard for me not to use profanity when describing it. He said that after the debate last night. He said, we should be using the leverage of the debt ceiling to actually enforce spending restraint. Exactly. That's what they haven't done every time they've raised the debt ceiling. They don't use it as any leverage to affect any restraining on spending. He says the deal also will add $56 billion in additional spending to both fiscal years. So you understand that. Okay, the debt is the cumulative deficits. But of course, we're going to go into debt at a faster rate because they're not only are they not using anything to leverage down the spending, they're actually going to increase the spending. So what's going to happen? Well, according to Senate rules, Rand Paul can keep talking until midnight as long as he doesn't sit down or take a bathroom break, at which time the debate will expire. And they say that's when things get interesting because his fellow senator from Kentucky, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, will then move to vote on cloture, a Senate procedure that limits the debate of a bill to 30 hours, essentially stopping the filibuster. This is the way that it will end. The leadership of the GOP has worked hand in glove with the Democrat leadership to do anything that the two of them want to do, anything their corporate masters tell them to do. Well, of course, we had the economic debate last night with the GOP leadership, and I thought it was interesting because today, and I want to wish him a happy anniversary, this is Ben Carson's first 1-year anniversary of being a Republican. He registered 1 year ago today, became a Republican, and here he is. In less than a year, he had 3 GOP debates as a presidential candidate. That's great. I really don't care whether he's in the GOP party or not. I really don't care about partisan politics. What I do care about is if he knows about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, things like that. And I look forward to celebrating the 1-year anniversary when Ben Carson reads the Bill of Rights, reads the Constitution, reads the Nuremberg Code, understands why we have moral, ethical codes that prohibit people from demanding that you take things like vaccines against your informed consent. That he could read the Constitution to understand why we had to have a constitutional amendment for prohibition. That's the anniversary I'm looking forward to celebrating. But of course, CNBC is celebrating. They got 14 million viewers. That's far fewer than have been at the other debates, but it is still huge audience for CNBC. And how did they run this debate? Well, of course, we've heard a lot of comments. Everybody is talking about how awful that was. We covered it live last night. We're going to have some clips of that coming up here on the nightly news, some highlights from that debate. And certainly it was poorly managed by CNBC. For one thing, look at the way the time broke down. This is New York Times calculations of who got how much time. I was surprised to see that Kasich wasn't the person who got the most amount of time. Actually, he got about 8 minutes and 42 seconds. Carly Fiorina got the most, 10 and a half minutes. And I think that we need to start referring to her not as the former HP CEO, but as the fired HP CEO. It's amazing to me that somebody would use the fact that they got fired as a CEO and that they failed as a Senate candidate. That's her big resume ticket items. After Fiorina, there was Rubio, Trump, then Kasich. Carson, who had just taken the lead, national lead in the polls, was next to the last in terms of the amount of time that he got to talk, only 7 minutes. And of course, Jeb Bush was the very last one on that totem pole. But what did they talk about? Well, they talked about the economy, supposedly, but not really. There was a lot of back and forth, a lot of personal attacks that they tried to instigate, and a lot of personal attacks from the moderators themselves debating the candidates. But one of the things I think that really got me concerned about this, made me angry about this debate, besides the fact that they talked about a lot of non-substantive issues, was the fact that when they finally did talk about the economy, no Republican candidate, and I mean no Republican candidate, including Rand Paul, offered any substantive reforms for controlling this out-of-control blimp that we call the federal government. Nobody offered anything. As a matter of fact, they couldn't think of a single thing to cut except for Social Security. Isn't that pathetic? Isn't that pathetic? And Rand Paul was one of the worst in that. I love Rand Paul when it comes to civil liberties, but on defense spending, on his policy with Israel, and on this, he is absolutely wrong. Look at this. Rand Paul exaggerates the effects of raising the age of eligibility for Medicare. And of course, they crunched the numbers and they said, well, if he was to raise it from 65 to 67, it would only save $19 billion over 10 years. That's not really the point. The point is this the only thing a libertarian candidate can come up with? I remember when a real libertarian candidate, Harry Brown, ran for president, and he went back and he said, look at the income tax. Do you think you could, how about let's just talk about getting rid of the IRS? Let's not talk about different income levels, different tax rates. Let's just get rid of it. Oh, that's not realistic, they say. Look at how much it contributes to the overall budget. As a matter of fact, there's a large chunk of the budget that we don't pay for each year. That's called the deficit. But in addition to that, if you just look at the personal income tax aspect of it, in 2014, the personal income tax only contributed 36% of the government's revenue. If we were to lose that, how far back would we have to cut the government in order to do that? Would it go back to 1932 levels? No. 2004 levels. Do you think we could live with that? Do you think we could live without a government that sends MRAPs to all of our police departments, that doesn't put cameras on every corner, that doesn't create $3 billion blimps to hover over us? Do you think we could get rid of some of the things that we've put into our government since 2004 and live without having a personal income tax at all? Let's go for a flat rate of 0. And the way we do that is we get government back to its constitutional limits. It's wrong to take this out of Social Security. Huckabee was right about this when he says it's not an economic issue, it's a moral issue. If you're going to lie to people, if you're going to tell them you're going to take 15% of their income for their entire working life, and then you say, now we're going to not give it to you. Because there's other aspects of Social Security that make it insolvent. Of course, part of it is the entitlements. There are entitlements built into Social Security for people who are not paying into it as a retirement fund. And then the federal government is using it as their own personal slush fund, borrowing from Social Security, using the money for other things. Let's not break faith with what we're doing with retirees at the end of their life. That is absolutely immoral. And in the past, they've talked about privatization, but evidently that is off the table. We are told that at one point in time, well, let's talk about giving people the option to invest their money themselves. And of course, that in and of itself is problematic because they would force you to invest your money in Wall Street. How about if they let us keep that 15% and apply that to our mortgages? Do you realize that even if you were in at the maximum amount that a bank will allow you to borrow on a home, 40% as a debt limit on your home mortgage, if you were to take that 15% and apply it, even if you were leveraged to the max on your home mortgage, you could turn your 30-year mortgage into a 15-year mortgage. They wouldn't like that, though, would they? Because if you did that, you wouldn't be in debt to the banks. You would start to build capital on your own. You would get out of debt. No, they want you to put your money and they want you to borrow money from the banks, and if you've got any money left over, they want to force you to put it into the Wall Street casino. And Donald Trump nailed that precisely when he went after Kasich for his Lehman Brothers experience. Now, he got the title wrong. He wasn't on the board, but what he said about Kasich was fundamentally right. He got over $500,000 bonus as everybody was going down the tubes. And one of the ways that he got this, if you look at this story from International Business Times, one of the ways that he did it was by pushing state pension funds to invest into risky investments where they lost money. And both Kasich and Jeb Bush were trading their influence not as lobbyists, but as something that was not regulated. That's the underhandedness of it. Coming up, the Department of Energy tries to scare us for Halloween, blaming climate change on smashing pumpkins. Sorry, Billy Corgan.
I want more candy. I want more video games. Lie.
And it's that type of behavior that spurred me to do the research to develop a true nutraceutical formula that was designed to smooth out and help children focus. All of our children are hit with modern mind control. Television, music, fast food, GMOs, sugars, you name it. Young humans have not yet developed their nervous system and are being hammered daily by globalist concoctions. It's no wonder they can't focus and calm down and then are put on dangerous psychotropic drugs. Working with my team, we set out to find the best formula with the highest quality ingredients that children would actually like and take. We worked with the leading manufacturer in nutritional supplements that are safe for children to bring you the most affordable and powerful calming formula out there. Introducing Child Ease with herbs and calming extracts like chamomile and lemon balm and essential nutrients that taste great. Obtain your Child Ease today at InfoWarsLife.com. That's Child Ease exclusively at InfoWarsLife.com.